What's up, baby bards? I'm Anne Richmond, aka Hearthsinger, the head bard in charge around these parts, and I am very excited because today we are going to be exploring one of my very favorite tabletop role-playing games. We will be talking about the mysteries of the mythic North that never was in the Nordic horror RPG, Vaesen, from Free League Publishing. So settle in for setting details, come on over for character creation, and back that ass up for basic rules like skill checks and initiative tracking and combat. This is by no means meant to be a comprehensive guide because this could easily be a series where we go over every chapter of the book, but hopefully by the end of this conversation, you'll have what you need to get started with character creation and decide if this is a game you're interested in exploring with your friends. So player characters in Vaesen are either members of or hired by a Northern European secret society dedicated to the studying and handling of mythical and magical creatures. These are mysterious beings who lurk around corners or at the edges of your vision, and not everyone can see them. But you do. You have what's called the sight. You received the gift of the sight through suffering some sort of trauma in your past, which has led you to this strange line of work. This terrible truth may have opened you up to an exploration of the occult, or simply given you an empathy for people who are suffering in the sway of dark forces. Either way, this game places you in mythic 19th century Northern Europe. It's a cold climb teeming with forests and small villages and a few sparse cities dedicated to enlightenment and the development of industry. While Christianity floods civilization, there are still plenty in the countryside who cling to the old ways. This is a dark Gothic setting steeped in Nordic tradition and folklore, from ghosts to gnomes to echoes of the Norse gods themselves. And recently, Free League Publishing ran a Kickstarter for an expansion to Vaesen covering mythic Britain and Ireland, replete with references to Arthurian legend, fairy rings, and more. I play on a Vaesen actual play podcast called The Lost Mountain Saga, and we are super excited because our second season is set in the world of this expansion, and there is so much good shit, guys. Get ready. Our first season is primarily set in Sweden, so definitely go check that out if you want to get a feel for the base game. One of my favorite things about Free League is the fact that you can typically roll a character in just a few minutes. So there's not a lot of time between deciding you want to play and actually sitting down to tell a story. Now, there are 10 archetypes that you have to choose from. You might be an academic, a doctor, a hunter, an occultist, an officer, a priest, a private detective, a servant, a vagabond, or a writer. Once you've decided which one of these archetypes you're going to roll with, you'll want to mark that page in the book because you'll need to reference it a bunch of times during character creation. Your archetype is going to determine what your main attribute is, which is going to be integral to playing the features of your class successfully. For instance, as a hunter, my main attribute would be precision. This is the attribute that supports skills such as ranged combat, medicine, and stealth. Each archetype also comes with a main skill, and this will be the only skill that you can train up to 3 points during character creation. Archetypes also gate access to the first 3 talents that you can choose between at the beginning of the game. For instance, an occultist would have 3 choices. You have conjuring tricks, which allows you to use stealth instead of manipulation when using a conjuring trick to influence people. You also have access to medium, which allows you to perform seances and contact the dead or predict the future. And striking fear for when conflict is the only option. It allows you to force a human enemy to flee, freeze, faint, or attack. The archetype will also give you guidance on the range for your resources. This is your money in this game. You'll get a range and you'll start at the lower value, and you can only raise it to the highest value available to your archetype during your campaign. The archetype will also list the equipment that you start the game with. There might be some amount of selection. I think the hunter got an option between a knife or a dog. You can guess which one I chose. And all the stats for the equipment start on page 74. Archetypes also give you really clear guidance on how to create a compelling backstory that led you to becoming an investigator for the society. They offer you examples of the trauma that might have granted you the sight, and of course the dark secret. Everybody in the society has a dark secret, and it's usually a source of some amount of shame and functions primarily as a way for the game master to really draw you into the story and build tension to climax as the mystery goes on. And it's really just a leaping off point for you to take your first steps into a larger world, a la Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, really a la Luke Skywalker, by way of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I digress. So now that you've answered all of those questions, you likely have a clearer view of the character you're bringing to the table. So it's time to nail down an age, and this is only important because your age determines how many attribute points you get to assign and how many skill points you get to assign. Younger characters get more attribute points due to their youth and vigor, while older characters are going to lean more heavily on their skill points due to the teachings of their life experience. As you assign your attribute points, keep in mind that each needs to start with at least 2 points. So once you've subtracted the 8 needed just to be a person on the earth, I suppose, then you can use the remaining to customize their attributes to fit the point of view you have on your character. You can assign your skill points however you'd like, but keep in mind you can only train your archetype's main skill up to a max value of 3. Everything else can only be trained up to a maximum of 2 during character creation. So by now your character sheet is likely looking pretty filled out, but you will see that you have a spot for something called advantages. Advantages are determined during the game, so you won't need to create one now, but you should know that you get 1 per mystery. It might be from a vision that you had leading up to setting out from headquarters. It could be a therapeutic conversation you had with a friend that makes you ready to face your trauma, or it could be the blossoming of a new romance with another investigator. Who could say? This advantage is likely going to come from roleplay or discussion made during the preparation phase of the mystery, but it will grant you a +2 modifier to a related skill test or push test agreed upon by the game master. However, this is one of those situations where you need to decide whether or not you're going to apply this advantage to a roll before making it. Best of luck. The game mechanics for Vaesen are based on Free League's award-winning Year Zero engine. You'll absolutely recognize the style of play from the Alien RPG or Tales from the Loop if you've tried those previously. So as you solve problems or seek peace with various Vaesen, you'll need to roll conflict checks. The flow of Vaesen is best when it feels cinematic and conversational, so tests should only be rolled if there's someone trying to stop you or if what you're trying to achieve is particularly difficult. Vaesen is a d6 system, and when you roll a pool of dice, you are looking for magic number 6. 6s are the only successes in Vaesen. Say that 3 times fast. 6s are the only successes in Vaesen. Wow, I did not expect to f***ing nail that. You need at least 1 6 to succeed on an unopposed roll, though bonus successes might offer you additional knowledge or insight into clues to solve the mystery. However, if someone is opposing your conflict check, the goal is to roll more successes than they do. When assembling your dice pool, you're going to use the number of dice that equals the score of the skill you're rolling, and then you'll add the number of dice related to the attribute that is connected with that skill. And on top of that, you might add any bonuses from advantages, equipment, or talents. For instance, if Violet the Hunter is attempting to sneak up on a mysterious camp deep, deep in the woods, she would attempt a stealth precision roll. So our stealth is 1 and our precision is 5, so she would roll 6 dice in that pool, but perhaps there might be someone waiting at that camp she doesn't know about. So both parties would roll off and Violet gets 1 success, but then the NPC rolls 3 successes and Violet finds herself on the other side. And as she approaches that camp, Violet finds the cold barrel of a gun pressed against her temple. So let's say you failed a conflict check. If you fail in a dangerous situation, there could be some very real consequences. You might suffer a related physical or mental condition. And in this game, conditions are basically our hit points, for lack of a better term. And for each condition that you suffer, you're going to subtract 1 die from all rolls linked to those physical or mental attributes. For example, let's say I had somehow sustained 2 mental conditions and I was now rolling a vigilance check. I would have to roll at a -2 die penalty. Or let's say I had sustained a physical condition during combat and now in a later round I was attempting a ranged attack. I would have to subtract 1 die from that roll. So managing conditions is really what enables characters to continue to take action in the game, whether physical or mental. Because if you take 4 conditions on your physical track or 4 conditions on your mental track, you end up broken. Once a player is mentally or physically broken, they can no longer take actions of either type until they are healed. And they have to roll for a critical injury on the related table on page 64 and 65. To determine this critical injury, you're going to roll a d66 or roll 2d6 and then smash those numbers together and have a look at the reference on the table. Some injuries last forever and they'll provide a permanent penalty to a certain skill. For instance, severed fingers would give me a -1 penalty to ranged combat. Other penalties might last for a number of rounds, a number of hours, or even a number of days. Though suffering is not always without its advantages. For instance, if you go into a coma on the critical injury table, you get a +3 to investigation due to the insight granted to you by a prophetic vision. There are rare, incredibly high-risk situations that have the potential to knock you to broken immediately, such as trying not to fall from the top of a building or avoiding an oncoming train. When a player has failed a roll like that, they may want to push their roll. And on a push, you take all the dice that were not successes and you can roll them again. But in return, you have to suffer a condition. Vaesen is primarily about tortured humans finding solutions to life's greatest mysteries as old ways brush up against new industry. It's not built as a combat engine, but sometimes combat or conflict does happen. It might be with the monsters that you're investigating, but oftentimes it's with humans. So when diving into aggressive negotiations, you'll need to know how to draw for initiative. That's right, in this game you don't roll dice to determine turn order in a round, you actually just draw from a deck of cards numbered from 1 to 10. Lower numbers go first, higher numbers go later in the round, and once per round at the top of initiative, players can choose to switch places with another player. Players should keep in mind that Vaesen cannot often be faced and killed in combat. It's more often a matter of holding them at bay long enough to find an escape or perform some sort of ritual setting the world to rights again. On their turn in initiative, players can choose to take 1 slow action and 1 fast action, or they may opt to take 2 fast actions. Slow actions usually take more time and effort, like scrawling an arcane sigil on the ground, or maybe you're shooting someone with a rifle. Fast actions might be shouting a few important words to somebody or drawing a new weapon. If you need more guidance for which actions are fast and which are slow, you can have a look at page 60 in the rulebook. And it's good to keep in mind that you don't always want to use both of those actions on your turn. You can always save your fast action to react later in combat to evade or parry an attack from an enemy. If you've held your fast action in reserve for just such a moment, when an enemy attacks, you can roll a force, close combat, or agility test to see how many successes you get. For every success you get, it reduces theirs by 1, and if you then get more successes than they do, you can opt to switch turns in combat with the enemy. However, if you don't meet or exceed the amount of successes that the enemy scored, you get to reduce the damage done by how many successes you rolled. As far as movement goes, a scene where conflict is occurring is divided into zones. To move from one zone to an adjacent one would be a fast action, while moving across 2 zones would be a slow action. Enemies that aren't in the same zone with you are going to require ranged weapons to attack. And sometimes there are features in the terrain that cause you to have to roll a skill check to get from one zone to the next, like a pile of rubble or a locked door. So when you're attacking, you have to score at least 1 success, and the damage is determined by whatever the weapon lists as damage, and they'll take that many conditions. Multiple successes allows you to choose between a few options. You might choose to deal an extra physical damage to the enemy. You could switch initiative order with the enemy, outmaneuvering them. You could stress your enemy mentally instead of physically. You might push the enemy into another zone, or you could force the enemy to drop something they're holding. And Game Masters should note that as Vaesen take conditions from your player's damage, they often get stronger and more scary. So combat can turn on its heel real fast if they are not careful. Now, while Vaesen makes a great one-shot, I will say that I think the real strength of this system lies in a longer campaign made up of several mysteries. And I could be biased there, but I think when you have character creation based so much around dark secrets and past traumas that have led people to this life with the society, I think it's important that they get a chance to discover things about each other. And oftentimes that's going to take more than just one mystery to bubble to the surface. You also get to experience the progression of your character as you move from one mystery to the next, and the book is going to lead you through that by providing the Game Master with a series of questions on page 25, and for every yes that you answer to those questions, you get 1 XP. And when you have harvested 5 XP, you earn an advance, and this will allow you to increase the value of a skill you have by 1 or to purchase a new talent. And the really cool thing is that once you are past your level 1 or your character creation status and you've moved on to the next mystery, you can choose a talent from anywhere, either the general talents that are available to everyone or the talents from another archetype altogether. So there's a lot of opportunity to customize as you go. So hopefully this video helped you learn some of the basics of running your own Vaesen game. I hope you try it out. Of course, it is no substitute for going and grabbing the book yourself and delving deep into its many delightful pages. So I will make sure there's a link to that in the info section below. If you found it helpful, by all means, give this video a like and subscribe for more tabletop RPG content. And if you want a chance to play Vaesen, I plan on running a few mysteries for my patrons over on Patreon. You can sign up for a table at just $5 a month, so it is a steal. I'd also love to know, which archetypes do you find the most enticing? Let me know your choice in the comments below. And of course, I'll see you next week on the next quest. Bye! If you're still watching this and you found me because of Lost Mountain Saga, I just want to tell you thank you so much. We've received so much support for our Ko-fi and for the show itself, and people are always tweeting at us and telling us like how much the story means to them. Honestly, it's one of the projects I am most proud of. So if you haven't had a chance to go listen to our first season, please do it. I hope you enjoy Astrid, the occultist desperate to rebuild the society in Uppsala. I miss that bitch.